So I've popped open the index.php page, and let me go into the minimal view so we have a lot more real estate. You know what? I'm just going to crunch this up a little bit. So there we go. So what we're going to do now is actually create an actual object based on the class that we just created in the class lib_php page. So again, we have to start with our PHP code block. And there we go. So there's a very particular syntax that we need to use to actually create an actual object. The process of creating an object, by the way, is called instantiation. Create an instance of it. So first thing you need to create a variable, and then you assign that variable to a person object. So now we're actually creating a person object. Remember, the class was called person. So new is a reserved word. It's a keyword in PHP. And when PHP sees a new keyword, it knows that we want to instantiate a person object. And it knows about person's objects because we've included a reference to the file that contains the class definition for person, if that makes any sense. I hope anyway. So now if we just save this, and now we're going to launch the browser and we're going to see what happens in our actual PHP pages. So here we go. Now I'm going to hit refresh, and we see nothing, which is totally expected. And we'll see why in a second. In our index.php page, in the view, even though we've created a new person object, we actually haven't told PHP to do anything with that person object. Now, before I go on, let me just clarify one thing. When you're actually creating an object in PHP based on the class, the object is actually created in PHP's server memory. It becomes a living, breathing object, if you will. Essentially, what we're doing is reserving a spot for this object in memory. Okay, so how do we tell PHP to actually do something with our newly created person object? By the way, we've created a handle to that object. A handle, think of a handle on a frying pan. And that handle, of course, is the variable Stefan. So now when we want to manipulate this new object, we have to use this variable Stefan. To be clear about this, once with a class rather, you can use it as the basis of unlimited number of objects. So I could create another object called Nicole, and again, it's based on the person class, but as far as PHP is concerned, these are two separate entities. They exist apart from each other, and they have nothing to do with each other except that they're both based on the same prototype, the class object, the class person. Now that I've clarified that, hopefully for you guys, so I'm just going to create room by deleting this now. So we're just going to work with our one person object, which is called Stefan. And what we're going to do now is we're going to access the method we created, the function we created called getName. And again, if you haven't read the tutorial, in object-oriented PHP, functions are referred to as, they're called methods. They're exactly the same things as functions, but for some reason, some nerd way back when decided that if a function is inside of class, it's a method. Anyhow, so I may jump back and forth and say function or method. I just wanted to be clear that you knew what I was talking about. To access a function / method inside of a class, we have to use the arrow operator. And let's first start off by using our variable, and the arrow operator looks like this. So that tells the PHP engine that we're accessing something inside of the Stefan object. And what we're going to access is the method or the function called getName. And there we go. So we'll save that and let's take a look at how it looks in the browser. Back in Firefox, I'll hit refresh. And we don't get anything. Again, that's expected. And the reason we don't get anything is because if you recall rather, in the original class, we're just telling the function getName, we're just telling the function to return the this.name. So what we could do is tell it to echo out something, for instance. So we could say, maybe say echo and this.name. So we'll print that, we'll save that rather. And what we'll do is we'll pop open our browser again and we'll hit refresh. And there we go. Our name is being echoed out. And that's because in our class, we just told it to echo out something. But what we should do, we want to separate what happens in the view pages, what the pages people actually see, from the logic in the classes. We should control what happens in the views, inside of the views. That is probably a very confusing statement and a very hard thing to understand. So what I would suggest that you take away from that statement is that basically in object-oriented PHP, we want to try to keep things separate from each other. So we want to keep logic in terms of how people and what people will see in the pages out of the base classes. You want to sort of contain that within your PHP pages themselves and your view pages. Okay, going off on a tangent, let's get back to the code. So yes, we have a return. So what I can do is I can just echo it out here. And what we're going to see, hopefully we'll see it work. So, and there we go, Stefan. So what I've done now is I've taken the decision of whether to print this to the page. I took it out of the class. The class here only has the logic, and the logic is this return the value of this variable here, name, right? This.name. And but I didn't, this class does not say how it should be handled, how this information should be handled. I've left that to our view, where I've decided here to echo it out. I could do all kinds of things. I could print it out, I could make it bold, I could stick it in another function, doesn't matter. But the point is, if you remember, I spoke about that separation. You see this being illustrated in a very basic way. So anyway, so now what we see is that we've created our object, we've instantiated it. Our handle to that particular object is found with this variable. So now we have a variable which is now, according to, as far as PHP is concerned, is actually a reference to our new object. And we're asking the object to, we called that object's getName function. And that getName function returns the value of this variable. We could change this to my full name, save that, and if we refresh the browser window, we get the full name. So there we go. We've created the object, we've created our class rather, we've defined a function or method inside of our class, and then we've actually instantiated the object. This is the process of instantiation. And then we've actually echoed out the value held in the Stefan object to our page for the world to see. This is very, very basic object-oriented programming, and there's a lot more to learn, but at least you got your feet on the ground now, and you have a basic idea of what it's all about.